celebrate Black History Month, this video is going to offer a look into the extraordinary lives of 6 individuals. From a queen who fought off the Romans to a freedom fighter in French Guadeloupe, let's celebrate the lives of these incredible figures who deserve to be spoken about more than they are. The first figure who I'm going to be discussing is Queen Amanirenas, who for 30 years ruled the kingdom of Kush. Kush is situated in modern-day Sudan and the south of Egypt. Queens ruling independently was not atypical in Kush, but what makes Amanirenas' story so exceptional was how she resisted the Romans' effort to conquer her lands. Her borders were threatened by the Romans during their campaign in Egypt under Emperor Augustus, especially when they attempted to make Kush-controlled areas pay taxes. So in response, Amanirenas' soldiers attacked Roman settlements, beginning the conflict. This war lasted for a number of years, and during that time Amanirenas displayed her military prowess. But this did not come without personal cost. In the early fighting around 25 BCE, Amanirenas lost her husband. But Amanirenas did not stop her fight against the Romans. For the sake of herself, her son, and her people, she led a new campaign against the Romans from the Kush capital, Moreira, with 30,000 troops. Her assault was victorious. She attacked various cities like Philae. The most important sacking was of Cyrene, modern-day Aswan, where the forces were said to have taken the head of a bronze statue of Augustus back to their capital as a trophy. This is true, as the head in question has been uncovered in archaeological digs. The Romans responded with a brutal counterattack of pillaging and assault, being emboldened with 10,000 new reinforcements. Amanirenas fought back against the Romans, but personal tragedy struck again. Not only was she blinded in one eye, but she lost her son. After years of fighting, peace negotiations began between the two sides in 24 BCE. The treaty was not crippling for Amanirenas and her kingdom, however. Augustus withdrew his armies, accepted Kush's borders, and agreed to take no taxes from the Kush peoples. Amanirenas ruled for 14 more years. She is recorded in both her local history, as is visible on a stela kept in the British Museum, and the history of the Roman writers who recorded the war, like Cassius Dio and Strabo. No matter how Roman sources choose to portray her, Amanirenas remains a great figure, being one of the only rulers in history who successfully resisted an invasion by the Romans, and to also maintain her independence. Lourenco Mendonca de Silva is another figure who unfortunately is not known as much as he should be. It was originally believed that Lourenco was from Brazil. However, the work of the historian José Nafafé has revealed that Lourenco was in fact from the kingdom of Angola. Lourenco was born into the Angolan royal family at some point in the late 1600s. The exact details surrounding his birth are unknown, but he was born into a tumultuous time for the house of Mendonca. During the 1640s, the kingdom's relationship grew fractious with their Portuguese overlords, which prompted a period of war and revolt against the colonial forces. This came to a head in 1671 when the independence of Mendonca was destroyed and the royal family was ousted from power. Being a prince, Lourenco was not killed like his father and was instead exiled from his native land. He was taken to Brazil sometime around 1671 to 1672 alongside some other members of his family. It was this migration that was particularly important for Lourenco's later life, because he witnessed the horrors of slavery that would inspire his later fight for abolition. He was taken away from Brazil after his family began to make contact with escaped slaves, and it was feared by Portugal that they would join forces with the royals to retake power back in Angola. Lourenco ended up being taken to Portugal to study in a monastery in Braga, where he remained for a few years. He then went on to Lisbon, where he came into contact with confraternities for Black Christians, whom he acted as a lawyer for. It was here he began to legally argue against slavery. His work in Toledo further built up his case. In 1682 he went to Madrid in search for a credential to go to the Vatican to present his case against slavery. He gained the credentials that he needed. Mendonca remarkably went to the Vatican in 1684 to present his case against European slave-trading nations. He presented the accounts of cruelty and toil from the slaves that he had encountered over the years. His case was not just brushed aside by the Vatican. It caused Pope Innocent XIV to formally condemn the enslavement of black people and the slave trading on the whole. His claim for liberty was universal, as José Nafafé states. It went beyond the predicament of enslaved Africans to include other groups in Africa, Brazil, the Caribbean, Portugal, and Spain. This is what makes Lourenco such an important figure to talk about, because his work helped to set the foundation of the abolition movement, which white figures like Wilberforce get much of the credit for. Although little is known about Ivory Bangle Lady, I still wanted to mention her because of what she represents, the multicultural nature of the Roman world. Her body was uncovered in 1901 in the city of York, which at the time would have been the settlement of Arboretum. The Ivory Bangle Lady was buried around the 4th century, in a way that denotes wealth. She had a stone sarcophagus, alongside other goods, such as ivory jewellery, blue glass beads, a hand mirror, and a blue perfume bottle. There also was a bone inscription, which reads, "Hail sister, may you live in God." Studies of her bones and their isotopes show that she had African heritage. Although we know nothing of her life, her bones suggest that she was 18 to 23 when she died. She shows that Roman Britain and urban centres like Arboretum were diverse places, where elite status was not limited by a person's heritage. Samples taken from 2 Arboretum grave sites show that 10% of the bones had African heritage. Ivory Bangle Lady also suggests that the Romans did not have such rigid concepts of racial difference, like in later modern societies. The next figure unfortunately is more elusive, and not much is known about her, but she is still important to discuss. La Mulatresse Solitude was a freedom fighter in the struggle against French colonizers and slave owners in Guadeloupe. She was born into slavery around 1772, the daughter of an enslaved African woman and a white sailor who forced himself on her mother on the slave ship during the Middle Passage. Having spent most of her life as a slave, Solitude escaped her owners with her mother and joined a band of Maroons. Although slavery had been abolished by the French Assembly in 1794, slavery was once again made legal by Napoleon in 1802, who wanted to re-establish French colonies. French soldiers were sent to Guadeloupe to impose Napoleon's orders. This proclamation and the subsequent aggression triggered slave revolts and resistance by free soldiers of colour and a network of Maroons who dwelt on the island. Solitude participated in this rebellion alongside other Maroons. She fought in armed battles against French troops in the spring of 1802, even after she became pregnant. She became famous for her skill and ferocity, shown by an episode when she threatened captured French troops through a demonstration with rabbits. The resistance success was halted, however, when they were forced to retreat on the 22nd of May, 1802. This was after there was a severe counterattack by French troops on Fort St. Charles, which the fighters had captured. Solitude was unfortunately wounded in the attack and captured by the French. She was sentenced to death for her resistance, but because of her pregnancy, her execution was delayed. She was hung after her child was born on the 29th of November 1803. Despite the Maroon resistance, slavery was reimposed on Guadeloupe and was not abolished until 1848. But Solitude's bravery and determination is still honoured to this day through a statue which still stands in Guadeloupe. John Blanke is the first ever person from Africa whom we have a record for in British history, which is why I'm going to talk about his life. It is believed that he arrived in England as part of Catherine of Aragon's household in 1501, when she travelled to England to marry Arthur, Henry VIII's brother who was supposed to be king. The first record of John appears in 1507, when he was paid a wage for being one of 8 royal trumpeters for Henry VII. The record states that he was paid 20 shillings a month for his work. John even managed to increase his wages in 1509, when he petitioned his new employer Henry VIII to double his wages to match that which his dead colleague earned. His request was accepted. John was present and performed in many key events, like the funeral of Henry VII in 1509, and the coronation of Henry VIII, in which he was said to wear a brilliant scarlet doublet. John even performed at the celebrations to mark the birth of Henry and Catherine's son, in January 1511, who unfortunately died 10 days after he was born. We know this because John was represented on the Westminster Tournament Roll, making him the first ever black person to be represented in a British image. We know that John married a British woman in 1512, from records which show that Henry VIII gifted him wedding presents. This suggests that John was held in high regard. John's position in the royal court is extraordinary, as it breaks the long-standing idea that the Renaissance world, especially at the echelons of power, was completely white. However, it was not unheard of to have black musicians and attendants in royal spaces. As David Olusoga writes, John Blanke was a man with marketable skills and talents, which enabled him to earn a comfortable living and command a certain degree of social status. Details of his life are preserved due to Blanke's close proximity to power. Dido Belle was born around 1761 to an enslaved African woman, Maria Belle, and a Royal Navy captain, Sir John Lindsay. It is believed that the two met whilst Lindsay's ship was undertaking a voyage from Senegal to the Caribbean. Whilst the early details of her life are unknown, Dido was presumably taken to England by her father at some point in her infancy, because she was baptised in St George's Church, Bloomsbury, when she was 5 years old in 1766. Her father gave responsibility for Dido's upbringing to his childless uncle William Murray, who raised Dido like his own daughter in his estate at Kenwood House. It is unclear exactly how her family regarded her status-wise, but she seemed to have been brought up as a lady. She learned to read, write and play music alongside her cousin Elizabeth Murray. This suggests that her family viewed her with affection and in high regard. She was given an annual allowance too, likely for her management of the Kenwood estate's dairy and poultry yard. It is unknown if this work was down to Dido's race, but production management was a common hobby for gentile women at the time, according to the English Heritage website. What makes Dido's life so notable is her connection to William Murray, a prominent lawyer who retained the position as Lord Chief Justice from 1756 to 1788. During his time as a lawyer, Murray oversaw a number of cases which reflected the changing attitudes to slavery, the most prominent of these the James Somerset case. James Somerset escaped to London from his master after they had come to England from America. James's master Stuart did not recognise his freedom and sent bounty hunters to capture James. The case against his imprisonment was brought to the courts by James's godparents and was supported by the abolitionist Granville Sharp. After a painful court battle, Murray eventually ruled in James's favour and stated that a master could not seize a slave in England and detain him to send him out of the realm to be sold. It is widely accepted that Murray's affections for Dido must have influenced his decision. Dido remained at Kenwood House for the rest of Murray's life, and upon his death she was given an inheritance. A lump sum of £500, which is approximately £40,000 in today's money, and an annual sum of £100. More importantly, Lord Mansfield in his will also legally ensured Dido's status as a free woman, which avoided her ever being taken into slavery. Dido married in 1793 to a man called John Davenant, a steward. The couple had 3 sons, Charles, John and William Thomas, and lived in Pimlico until Dido died in 1804. Kenwood House still stands today and is well worth the visit to see the beautiful place where Dido grew up. Dido had many privileges, having grown up around money, but her life captures the growing presence of black people during the Georgian era, particularly in urban areas like London. Throughout this video, we have explored 6 incredible figures whose lives all represent a point in black history, from the interconnectedness of the ancient world to the fight for abolition which was black-led. These are but 6 stories in a history that spans thousands of years. It is impossible to ever fully capture the richness of the millions of lived experiences. But I hope this video inspires you to look further into the lives of black historical figures, and on the whole, we centre history into diverse perspectives beyond a single month.